After August being a slower reading month of me finishing 3 books, I'm happy to say that for the month of September, I managed to finish 8 books. For those 8 books, 2 of them were manga and the rest were novels. And I also managed to keep to my goal of reading for each day of the month. Hi, if you're new here, my name is Katrina and I journal in the Hobonichi Weeks, and this is my reading journal for 2025. I have a goal to read every single day for this whole year. I am on track, which is nice. And I also wanted to have the goal of reducing the TBR that I already have, which I will admit is not happening so far this year. I keep buying as many as I read. I am borrowing less from the library now, but I am still purchasing a lot. We'll just recap over the books that I read using my weeks. So at the end of August, I was reading Dreamer's Pool by Juliette Marillier, which I was really enjoying, and I didn't quite finish it before the end of that month, so I carried it into September. Immediately after I finished Dreamer's Pool, I started Tower of Thorns, which is the second in the Blackthorn and Grimm trilogy. And in between that, I also read volume 14 of Spy Family because it was available from the library and it was going to be due back soon. I had managed to do my decorations, but unfortunately I had a lot of thoughts for Dreamer's Pool and Tower of Thorns, but I just wasn't really filling in my journal. I just have the notes at the moment, and I still have to sort of collect more thoughts, and in a way I had hoped to actually read the 3rd book immediately after, then I could sort of do a recap of the trilogy. But in the end I moved on to The Hallmarked Man by Robert Galbraith, which I finished in that week. And I also didn't have a lot of thoughts on this book either, but I'll get into that in a little bit. I attempted another print book, which was The Haunting of Gillespie House, didn't work. I DNF'd Never Bet a Duke. I read A Volume Man and His Cat, volume 12. I read the book called Just Animal Crossing. And then for the end of the month, I finished up with A Harvest of Hearts. Let's just have a look here in the back of my book. Again, none of these were my top of the TBR or my last chance reads. They were just ones that I had wanted to read. So nothing to mark off there. I'm just going to fill in my 2025 reads. I had to switch to this Muji pen because I've run out of inks in those other ones that I do use, and I thought I had purchased replacements, but they didn't fit, so I'll have to do some ordering, I think, online for replacements. I'm hoping this pen matches. I read a little bit more than I purchased this month, which is great. For my A to Z, I don't think there's anything I can mark off actually now. I've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 more letters to go, and we're getting into the tricky ones. I will say that I did try to read a book that I had. It is called You Need to Know, and that's by Nicola Moriarty, I think it might have been. and I DNF'd that like 3 pages in. I knew it wasn't going to be something that I was interested in reading. It is an ebook, so I can't donate it or anything, and who knows, maybe one day I will be interested in revisiting it, but at the moment no. So I'm still stuck on the Y letter, and none of my others can mark off. No. So I've got to start thinking of some more books. I did have a look to see if I could find something that started with these letters because they seem to be the trickiest, but I haven't really found anything that is interesting to me just yet. No more on my series tracker, though I did pull out another 2001, and it's by my bed, so I'm hoping I'll read that one in October. For my bingo board, I can mark off romantic fantasy. I am counting A Harvest of Hearts as my romantic fantasy read, although I mean it had romance, but I'm not rating it that high, to be honest. And I did get my daughter to pull out the next card, and she has selected highest rating. I don't think I had any others on the go, and I still haven't managed to get any in a row. Once I read highest rated, there's still 2 options for getting a bingo for this and this, but again, the aim is just to fill up the whole board anyways. And no more were marked off of my owned TBR. For last month's overview, I had wanted a spring feel, and I felt like it ended up being a bit more of a summer feel. So I'm going to try again for my September spread. We will see how we go. I do have a number of greens to use this time, so it's going to be a green theme. Hopefully it turns out quite nicely. As I mentioned, I finished the 8 books for September, so I may need to whip through these quite quickly. The first 2 that I finished were Dreamer's Pool and Tower of Thorns, both by Juliet Marillier. These are the first 2 in the Blackthorn and Grimm trilogy, and this is a fantasy series where there's fae and, you know, magical happenings and things like that. So we follow the main characters, Blackthorn and Grimm, for most of the books, but these are a multiple POV series, and so other characters are also given a point of view in them throughout the book, and there's no sort of trade-offs or anything. It's not one then the other. It all just kind of happens in a really natural way to flow the story. I really enjoyed these 2 books, and I liked that the voices were very distinct between the characters. And this one follows Blackthorn mostly, I would say, so she's kind of like the catalyst to begin the story. She's in prison, and the night before she's supposed to be able to go in front of the person in power to plead her case to be released from this prison, she's basically told by one of the guards, "You're out of luck, you're not going to ever make it in front of this person in power." And so in that same night, a fae comes to visit her and gives her a sort of a way out. He says, "I will release you from prison if you meet my 3 guidelines. You need to specifically head up to this village of my choosing and become a healer woman there. You need to give up on your revenge against this person in power." I can't remember his name at the moment. "And you need to give that up for at least 7 years. You cannot go after this person. And thirdly, you need to say yes and help anyone who asks for it." And in the end, though it's very difficult for her to agree to this, she does, because it is her only option. And in being released, also the character Grimm, he is also released, and they become kind of companions. They journey up to this village together where she settles in. He's Grimm's quite a handyman and has his own set of skills, and so they really complement each other, and they kind of set up this life together. And then there is like a plot, a magical plot. So in this, they need to help the prince of this area who is to be wed to what he thought was going to be the love of his life, but then some strange magical things happen, and it was all very like beautifully slow, but not like uncomfortably slow where you're a little bit bored. Like, lots of things happen. It's just the prose is so lovely to read. I do enjoy Juliette Marillier's writing. And then right at the end, it gets very intense, and it was very stressful. And then the second book follows the same characters. It's kind of a continuation on in the same timeline, but this time they need to go further afield to help a lady who has a magical being trapped in a tower. And this magical being is constantly wailing and upsetting the village, and it's kind of like a curse on her land. And Blackthorn and Grimm agree to go and help this woman with the curse. So that's those two, and I've still got the third one to go, and I'm really looking forward to it. In between those, I also read volume 14 of Spy Family. Not much to say about this one. It's just, we've got Twilight, he's a spy for the land. We've got Yor, she's an assassin. And then they have their adopted daughter, which is Anya, and she is psychic. She can read people's minds. And so this kind of family dynamic comes together, and neither of them, like, no one knows each other's secret identities. They think that they're all becoming a family because they all each need each other, which is true. And I really enjoy this one. It's quite a funny series, even though it's got all the spies and assassins in it. And I'm also watching the anime at the moment too. I'm looking forward to season 3 coming out soon. After this, I jumped onto a different sort of vibe, so no fantasy. I went with a private detective series. This is the Cormoran Strike series by Robert Galbraith. This is book 8 in the series, so it's quite developed in terms of the characters and the plot. I will say that this was probably my least favourite of the series. The mystery was pretty intriguing, but I was getting a little bit sick of the characters' personal lives that kind of gets intertwined into the mystery. They're very big books, and they're very convoluted in their plots, and I usually enjoy them. And this one was interesting. So it's kind of a cold case where a man is found dead inside a silver vault, so it's all locked from the inside essentially, and they sort of need to figure out how this person sort of came to be there, because they actually don't know who he is. So it's a little bit gruesome, so I won't go into the details, but they weren't able to 100% identify the body, and the private detectives, Robin Ellicott and her partner Cormoran Strike, they are hired as private detectives to figure out if it was this lady's boyfriend, yes or no. And then that sort of, it leads on a twisty tale of, could it be this person or this person? They have a few suspects of who it could be, and they need to really sort of narrow it down and rule out things. But then it also had the personal lives of these two characters intertwined, and because it had a lot of sort of miscommunication type tropes, I didn't enjoy it as much because of that. But it all sort of comes good, and I'm really looking forward to the 9th book. After that, I read Never Bet a Duke. This is by Alyssa Drake. It's part of the Wayward Dukes Alliance series. I think I bought it on sale a very long time ago, and I got my daughter, I was like to her, I don't know what I feel like reading, can you just choose something random from these books? And she happened to pick this one. She didn't know what she was picking, and I ended up DNFing this one because it got to the midpoint where a lot of the characters knew things that they hadn't been told, and there was a bit of confusion, and I wasn't really enjoying the story too much. Specifically, there was a stepmother, and her stepdaughter is like one sort of family dynamic, and then you got your main love interest, and he's a duke, and him and all his mates have decided that they will never get, duped into marriage. It's the worst thing that could happen to them. But of course, by this point, he's announced his undying love for this basic girl, and she's all like, oh, but I've got this drama. My sister is in prison, and the person that put her in prison was her own mother, which is my stepmother, and she's trying to get her sister out because her sister's done nothing wrong. And a lot of the scenarios where the stepmother was there were very inconsistent with the characterization, and there's not really much more to the plot. It's really just there's your main female, there's your main male, and then there's the stepmother and the stepsister sort of extra plot, but it's really just about them dancing and going to parties and things, which is usually enjoyable. But yeah, it just got a little bit confusing and a little bit far-fetched in the characters, and so I ended up DNFing that one. Then I read Man and His Cat Volume 12. This is just a really simple and sweet series about a man and his cat. So we're following like an elderly gentleman, and he has family, but his wife has passed away, and he ends up adopting a cat that seems like no one really wants from a pet store because he's quite a unique looking cat. But this man really loves his cat, and his cat really loves him, and so it's just really sweet, and sometimes it makes you quite teary to see how much they love each other. And then in volume 12 now we have a larger cast of characters, and they've all had their own sort of little stories and how they got intertwined again with this man. And he was a very famous concert pianist, and so he has musical friends, and then he's got his children and sort of their sort of branching stories, and so now it's getting a little bit more wider reaching, but it still just really focuses on the cats. It's very cute. Then I read a book called Animal Crossing. This was by Kelsey Lewin, and it is a sort of indie published book, and they're kind of like personal essays I'm getting from what I could see of the series, and they're all about video games. I have played the Animal Crossing New Leaf and the New Horizons, so I'm quite familiar with Animal Crossing. However, this book is focusing on the original Animal Crossing, which did, as she explains in the book with her little history at the beginning, was kind of 4 different variations depending on where you were in the world, but it was essentially the same game of just Animal Crossing. And I really loved reading this book because here is a person that loves Animal Crossing and has quite a lot of experience with it, but also has a lot of the background on sort of how it came to be and all the history, and so she's put a lot of that into the book. And so I really enjoyed that, having only played the newer sort of like versions or editions, I'm not sure what you want to call it. And so now she's gone back and said, this is what it was like in the beginning, and this is how it has changed over the years, and it has become, I guess, more appealing to people, like more people. In the early days, it was very interesting to see that the characters were a little bit meaner, and I also found it interesting that she talks about how everyone plays it differently, although there's not really that much to the game. It's not a complex game. Animal Crossing is, depending on which one you're playing, you're basically like a mayor or a villager or a person. You're moving to a town, or in New Horizons you're moving to an island, and you are just essentially just going about a day-to-day sort of business. You can shake trees, you can sell things to make money, you can plant flowers, you can build bridges, depending on which version of the game. They all got a bit more complex as they went in terms of the capacity for the game, because the 64 or the Wii version of the Nintendo games were, I guess, a little bit limited in space and scope because of the technology. And so I liked that she talked about how it was still a community game even when you weren't able to necessarily get that internet connection to go visit. And I also found like just the little things that she mentioned to be really interesting. Like, for example, she said in the original game you can't see the sky, like you can't look up, but that is like a pretty big thing in the newer games, in that you can look up at the sky and you can see shooting stars, you can see the moon changing. Sometimes they do fireworks for like New Year's. And those for me were important aspects of the game, especially because 2020 was when New Horizons came out and all of my friends had it, and we would message each other and say, I've got shooting stars, do you want to come wish on stars? And we'd all go to each other's islands and look at the stars. And you know, that wasn't available to her in the original game. Anyway, it just seems, I can say a lot about this book. I'm just going to wrap it up here. I'm just going to say that I feel like I would really want to have a chat with her about this game. She seems to love it, though she did sort of hint at not loving the newer ones, but I would say that's just because she played that first one and it was so ingrained in her Animal Crossing experience. And I really enjoyed this book, and I kind of feel like I would read it again. Even just that history bit at the beginning, it has a lot of very nice details about the games. I want to read the Majora's Mask one, it's the Zelda one, next. Then lastly, I read A Harvest of Hearts. I'm definitely running out of time now, so I'm just going to say that I did not enjoy this book at all. It was sort of marketed as a Howl's Moving Castle inspired book, and I would say it's not really so much inspired as the author lifted a lot of things directly from Howl's Moving Castle. So here we have Foss. She lives in the outskirts sort of villages, so they sort of make it sound like there's a center, which is the big town where the king lives and all the sorcerers live, and as you get further and further out, there's this like sort of smaller villages, and these sorcerers come out to each of the villages and they will take a piece of a person's heart so they can do magic, which is to keep the kingdom safe. This is what the king has said needs to be done. And Foster spends her whole time talking about how unattractive she is. That was really grating. I did not enjoy that at all. Like, she could mention perhaps, you know, she was a little bit more simpler looking than, you know, the beautiful sorcerers, but she just goes on about it all the time. And so the story sort of kicks off where one of the sorcerers comes, but this time it is a male, where previous years it had all been females. And he's just about to leave, he locks eyes with her, and then her heart is captured, basically. And she needs to sort of find him because she can't bear to be apart from him, and it's part of the magic. So she travels to his house, which is, you know, twisty turny magical house, and there she rocks up and he's like, who are you? She's like, I'm here to be your housekeeper, because she sees all these dirty dishes. But in the next chapter, the house magics her a whole kitchen with everything she could possibly ever want. It can magic up food and everything. She has no purpose there. She didn't need to do the dishes. The house could do the dishes. It had enough magic. And it just needed a little bit of work. Like, the idea was there with the heart magic and the kingdom, but it just seemed to go on and on about certain points, and then at the end it was all a bit rushed to solve, you know, the kingdom's problems, and I didn't enjoy it. So those were the 8 books that I read for the month of September. I hope you had a good reading month, and I will talk to you in the next video. Bye.